Hello, everybody. Hello. Testing, testing, one, two, three. How is everybody today? I hope everything is going well and that everybody's having a great day. And I am going to turn this music down just a bit in my ears. Because it's nice to have a little bit of music, at least for right now. Like I said, I hope everybody's having a great Wednesday. My name is Pondering Minds. We are going to be talking today, as the title says, about Gary Ridgway, who was dubbed the Green River Killer. We are going to be discussing his early life, like his childhood, and his adult life before the killing started, before he started everything. And we're going to discuss basically kind of what led up to when he began to do what he did. As always with this stream, I like to focus on the why. Why did he do what he did? Not so much what he did. There's so many documentaries and everything that explain what he did in gruesome detail. It's not necessarily where I want to focus on. I want to focus on why. We may never know exactly why he did what he did, but I like to explore possibilities. I like to explore kind of, just looking at what came before to see if we can kind of understand him a little bit. Like I always said, it doesn't excuse what he did, but it does explain it, I think, a little bit more. So that is what we're going to be talking about. I'll be starting that here in just a little bit. I kind of want to give people a chance to come in and say hi before we start. But if you're here, if you're lurking, or if you're just back there, stop in, say hi. Say hello, let me know that you're here. If you just want to lurk, that's fine too. I appreciate anybody and everybody who comes in. So if you're just a lurker and you just want to listen in, I'm perfectly fine with that as well. I just want to say welcome to you as well. So yeah, anyway, my day's been going pretty good. It's been pretty busy at work because I do a lot of or I have a day job that I work. So, yeah, it's been a pretty busy day, but that's okay. Let me send out on Twitch. And let everybody, or not Twitch, Twitter. Gary Ridgway. I really can't type today. Lord have mercy. Part 2. Okay, there we go. So anyway, yeah. So how are we doing? Are we excited about talking about Gary Ridgway? I know I'm excited about talking about Gary Ridgway, but then I'm a little crazy. So, but anyway, hope everybody's having a great day. Let's see. Just kind of getting everything set up and good to go. Oh, and I guess I don't need that part now. There we go. Now I can see everything on my screen. Well, I guess, we should get started. Yeah, for everybody who's watching this in the future on the video on demand, thank you so much for watching it offline. I really do appreciate anybody that stops by to check out the channel, to check out how I do things. Always looking for input, always looking for what might work better. So if you are wanting to join my Discord and talk about things, talk about gear, or talk. I cannot speak tonight. To talk to me about anything true crime related, or there are other projects that I'm working on, you can go to my Discord channel, which is right here in the chat. So if you're watching this in the video on demand, it's going to come up in the chat replay right now. That's the link. So, come and join me. We not only talk about true crime, but I do other things like I talk about, or I'm setting up an online open mic where people can come in and play their music on a stream. So we'll be starting that here pretty soon. I'm hoping it'll be starting in the month of November. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. So, definitely if you're interested in something like that, check out the Discord server, join up so that you can get notifications regarding that. And if you are a musician or an artist or a poet, really anything where you want to share your art with other people, I will be looking for folks to join in and share their talents on stream. So definitely join the Discord, and let me know if you're interested in doing that. Okay, well, on with the show. So we're talking about Gary Ridgway, who was dubbed the Green River Killer back in the 80s and 90s. He was a serial killer that worked a lot up here in Washington, and as I described last week, I actually live in the area where he worked, where he and where he did what he did. And so I remember growing up in the era of the Green River Killer and how freaked out everybody was about that. So of course this really kind of interests me because I have a personal connection to it. Not directly, I didn't directly know him, but a personal connection insofar as I live in the area, and so I do remember when he was active. So Gary Ridgway was born to Mary and Thomas Ridgway in Salt Lake City, Utah. He was the second of three sons, so he was the middle child. He had somewhat troubled childhood growing up in Seattle, so it looks like they moved from Salt Lake City, Utah to Seattle, Washington while he was a child. And he was often involved in violent arguments with his parents, especially his mother. So it sounds like his mother, in what I've been reading, his mother was a bit of a strict parent, a judgmental parent. From the looks of it, he had a habit of bedwetting into his early teens. So really kind of shows that right off the bat that we see that Gary Ridgway had a kind of a tumultuous upbringing. Not something that he probably felt very stable, like he had a stable footing in there. He also was shown that when he was tested for his IQ, that it was at 82, which is on the lower side. And so we see that he was not, a criminal mastermind. He was not a mastermind. And so that coupled with things like the bedwetting as a teen, and the judgment of a parent like he had with his mother, that really set him up for a certain kind of failure. Not necessarily set him up to be a serial killer, because there are a lot of people that go through things like that don't become serial killers, but it definitely didn't help. Right? So another part that didn't actually really help him as well is that his father was a part-time mortuary worker, and he would actually tell Gary Ridgway, or he would tell Gary, his son, stories about what the employees at that mortuary would do to the cadavers that were in there. That they would engage in acts of necrophilia, and he would describe this to his son. You see that come to play later on in when Gary becomes active in becoming a serial killer. It definitely probably instilled in him a fantasy that came into play later on. Not something that I would assume would be a really good topic to be discussing with your child. I do question the decision of his father to regale those stories to him. But it happened, and so Gary was left with that. It also was said that Gary had conflicting feelings of anger and sexual attraction towards his mother. We go back to Freud with this. Freud talked about how, sons want to sleep with their mothers and daughters want to sleep with their fathers. I don't know if I necessarily totally agree with that, but you do see a lot where sons will be closer with their mothers. They will put up any future relationship against their mother, for the most part, and in comparisons, whether it be good comparisons or bad comparisons or whatever. You do see that happening, and you do see that with daughters and their fathers. Daughters definitely who look up to their father, or even who don't look up to their father, who might have had crappy fathers, do compare their future relationships with that male figure that was so prominent in their life, whether the dad was absent, or whether the parent was absent, or in that person's life for long periods of time, or on a regular basis. Doesn't really matter. Parents leave a very strong indent on a child, and it stays with them, throughout their lives. So it definitely does not surprise me that he would have the anger, and that it would affect him throughout his life. The sexual attraction, I don't think I ever really had a sexual attraction to my dad, but so I don't know if that's necessarily something that's a regular thing. But with Gary Ridgway, it was. He was. It was said that he had this, conflicting feelings towards his mother, anger and sexual attraction, both pulling at each other when it came to his relationship with her. When he was in school, despite that he had to repeat a year twice because of the lower intelligence, and probably partly because of his home life. If you have that much of a tumultuous home life, it's going to affect how you are in school. That is just, there's just no doubt in my mind that it does affect children at school, and their ability to concentrate, their ability to believe in themselves, If your parents don't believe in you, or if you have a parent who uh, exhibits a lack of believing in you or a lack of faith in you, it definitely does tell a child, hey, you're not worthy. So that will be reflected in how they do at school. Either they come in um, with an attitude, and some do, but an attitude of, I'm going to prove you wrong, or they come in with an attitude of, you're right, I'm not worth anything. If my own parent doesn't even think I'm worth anything, why would anybody else? So it definitely would affect Gary's performance at school and how he acted with other kids. Now, the other kids, the classmates, described him as congenial and well liked among his student body. So, um, and we see this with serial killers. They are charming. They know how to uh, play the part. So we definitely do see this with Gary, with his classmates describing him as a congenial, well-liked person. Um, as a, but when he turned 16, when he was 16 years old in high school, he did attempt his first murder at that point. He had a 6-year-old boy that he took into the woods and stabbed him through the ribs. I, according to both the victims, so the victim lived. According to both the victim and Gary, he walked away laughing, saying, I've always wondered what it would be like to kill someone. That's not a normal thought for somebody, right? You know, I don't know that I've ever wondered what it would be like to kill someone else. But for Gary, it was something that he had fantasized about. It was something that he had wondered about. What would it feel like to actually do it? He obviously did not follow through with it, which was good. Um, but it is something that that he did try. Um, so that's kind of what his childhood and early life was like. He was um, someone who didn't really make a lot of an impression on people, I don't think, but enough of an impression for people to remember that he was well liked. So you know, it seems pretty normal. I mean, you don't. I What would make it probably a little bit abnormal is his relationship with his mom. If his mom was someone who was that hard on him, as he had described, then it probably was a bit more abnormal. I mean, if you think about the average family. Okay, that's just a shadow. Okay, I thought my nose was bleeding. Um, but um, if you have, you know, if you think about the average family, mom and dad, you know, supporting and growing the family, they're supportive of their children. Doesn't mean that they don't reprimand them or they don't punish them, because that does happen. But a lot of children do experience harsher punishments or harsher criticism, and that's not necessarily the normal. But there is a scale, you know, of course. So after he graduated high school, he married his high school sweetheart, Claudia Craig. He then enlisted into the Navy, and he went on a tour to Vietnam, where he saw combat. Now, what's kind of interesting in that is that my dad, not too long after probably Gary Ridgway, because Gary was born in let's see here, in 1949, so he's 6 years older than my dad. So my dad was actually in the Navy, and I think he was actually, I don't think it was the Vietnam War that he went overseas for, but he was in the Navy and he actually did go on a ship. And it's kind of interesting to think that there's a possibility at one point or another that my dad could have come across him, um, if they were in the Navy at the same time. And that's kind of weird to think about. But yeah, he joined the Navy, um, and he started having sexual encounters with prostitutes while they were in port. So this is where his I don't know, his urge to be with prostitutes came into play. Um, and it was pretty regular that this would happen. He actually ended up contracting gonorrhea during that time. He blamed the prostitutes for infecting him, which, I mean, probably was the case, you know. A lot, especially during that time, a lot of the prostitutes were not, or sex workers, were not, in those, you know, countries and such, they weren't necessarily the most high class that soldiers were meeting. So I mean, it's definitely possible and probably the case that he contracted gonorrhea from these prostitutes. And that is what began his disgust for them. So this is where we see him start to see prostitutes as objects, as more objects than he was seeing them as before. So these women, these prostitutes, these sex workers were, they were nothing to him. They were below nothing to him. And so when he returned to the U.S., he discovered that his wife had been having an affair, and that ended their relationship. So we've gone from, he was born in Utah in 1949, and, you know, moved it to Seattle. Pardon me. It doesn't really say when he moved over into Seattle. But he moved to Seattle when he was a kid. And then he started, you know, doing bad things. You know, he tried his first murder at the age of 16. Wow, excuse me. At the age of 16, he attempted his first murder, and then then he entered the Navy after high school, after getting married to his high school sweetheart, and had affairs, you know, and such, which, you know, it's kind of ironic. So he's having affairs with prostitutes, or having sex with prostitutes, while he's in ports, you know, having these sexual relations with women who were not his wife. He contracts, you know, gonorrhea through all this. And then he comes home and finds out his wife was having an affair while he was away. Kind of seems to me like both are at fault, but more than likely he did blame his wife for the marriage dissolving, and so, or falling apart. And so there's one more woman. So you got his mom, who he had these conflicting, irrational feelings towards. Prostitutes who, one of them somewhere, hi Jeff, one of them somewhere would have given him gonorrhea. So there's a woman that failed him right there. And then he comes home and finds out his wife had cheated on him. And so, mad sus, bruh. Yep. And so really we see a pattern here of where he is really hating women. Just like we found out earlier on that he had a sexual attraction to his mother, but also hated her, was angry with her because of the way that she treated him. It said that she was very hard on him because he was a teenager and still wetting the bed. So it really affected his relationship with women. And um, so after he got divorced, he was back in his hometown in 1972 after being honorably discharged. So he graduates from high school, enters the Navy, goes across the world to a tour in Vietnam, um, meets sex workers, in all these ports, that they were stopping in, ends up getting, gonorrhea. Um, at the end of his tour, he comes home, finds out his wife has cheated on him. They end their divorce. It's now 1972. He's moved back to his hometown of Seattle, and that's where that's where he is in 1972. He got a job at a local Kenworth plant painting and the design on trucks. And these are, I think semi trucks and trucks like that, the bigger ones, not so much for personal use, but for commercial use. He quickly found another spouse in Macia Winslow. So in his marriage, he would often have sex with her in public outdoor scenery. A little bit of exhibitionism, but hey, whatever floats your boat. In Western Washington area, so basically my area of the world, where it's the Seattle, um, Kenworth, those those kooky kids, yes. Later, it was found that some of those places were dumping sites of the bodies of many of his murders. So these are places that meant something to him. If he was having sex with his wife and also having sex with, or also killing these sex workers and dumping them in those areas, um, those areas obviously meant something to him. They had one child together that was named Matthew. Uh, Ridgway was not happy with the birth of Matthew, mostly because it changed their marriage in sexual sense. So because, now she's preoccupied with the baby, which is what usually, can happen in a marriage, it does change the relationship a bit. He now has to share her affection, he has to share her time, he has to share her attention, basically. I with this child, and for someone like Gary, he didn't like that. He wanted her always available for him whenever he wanted her. uh, right, exactly. But he didn't like that. So uh, so his demeanor toward her began to change, and his idea of foreplay on some occasions was to choke her. And she eventually divorced him. Uh, Probably partly because of that, maybe other things, but yeah, I mean, ladies, if a guy is into choking you as a form of foreplay, unless you're like really into that and you guys have things set up to where, safe words and all this kind of stuff, um, it really is something of a red flag, I would say, especially if it's something that is introduced as new, to the relationship that wasn't always there. I would say that, yeah, that would be a bit of a red flag for me, for sure. Um, so when we talk about Gary Ridgway's actions and behavior, so that's what we're focusing on tonight in part two, is what led him to be how he was, what led him to being who he was. And there are some psychological analyses on, just when you Google him, there are, theories and speculations, but of course these are only theories and speculations as to why he is the way that he is. Nobody can really know Gary Ridgway's mind and why he does what he does, but or why he wanted to do what he did. But I think that it can be fair to say that if his mother was as big of a judgmental bitch, for lack of a better term, to him growing up, especially in his formative years, so his younger years. Um, it definitely would impact on him or imprint on him, for his actions later on in life. We don't realize how much we affect children, uh, when they're growing up with us. Even me as an aunt, I try to be very mindful about how I am with my niece and nephew, because I know that that's going to imprint on them, because I am one of their only, actions with other human beings. They have their parents, and then they have the bigger family until a certain age, when they start meeting other kids and such. But in those formative years, you have to really understand the kind of impact that you have on a child. At least that's the way that I look at it. Again, not a psychiatrist, I'm not a counselor, I don't have a psychology degree. These are just things that I have learned over the years, and come in contact with. So, so they do, talk about how his illogical actions and behavior are, kind of all starts with his childhood wisdom. um, he had, hatred and such that, towards it, and it really is evolving around his mother. Uh, and so, he had these intense feelings of hatred towards her because of the way that she treated him. She made him feel less than. She made him feel dirty or unworthy. And so, which can happen, when you have unrealistic expectations of the child. It can really affect them. And being a parent, I mean, that's a huge, huge part of their life. It's a huge impact on how they view the rest of the world. He also developed the same type of hatred towards prostitutes or sex workers, because he viewed them as less than. He viewed them as objects. He viewed them as traitors because one of them, someone, gave him gonorrhea, and so, really, had that, that hatred move from his mother, on over to these other women in his life. And then his wife had an affair on him, and so he referred to her as a whore, putting her in the same category as these other women, these sex workers that he had met up within the Navy. Um, and then he moved on to a strong hatred for his second wife, um, because when was this again? So, are you talking about for his early life? He was born in 49, so we're talking about the 50s, and the 60s mostly, and then in the 70s when his second wife happened. It was in the early 70s, I think, when they got married and his child was born. But this hatred that has moved from his mother to his prostitutes to the first wife now has moved to the second wife because she now has divided attention. Um, she now has her divided attention between his son and him, and so he views that as probably as being a traitor as well, as being disloyal, I think is a good word for it, that she was not all about him anymore. So he felt no remorse later on when he was killing women, killing these women who were helpless, who society saw as as not worth it, as almost like just, it happens. They didn't really care about these women until they started, disappearing. And then when that was being noticed, it became um, a big story, around here. It became somewhat of a lore, this mythological creature almost. I do remember, people being afraid to go to the Green River, which is a river that goes right through the valley that I live in. I mean, it's a prominent river that goes through um, all the way, and people being afraid to go near it at any point because they were afraid of coming in contact with him. So he definitely lived in a lot of people's brains because they were all afraid of him, which rightly so. I mean, it would make sense to be nervous about whether or not you were going to cross paths with Gary Ridgway, whether you were a sex worker or not. So it just, but he did focus on the women who might not be missed right away. At least that's how he viewed them, that they would be easy targets, which is really sad that anybody would be viewed in that kind of way. Um, it says that there are some connections with for his killings of those women. For one, most of the prostitutes he hated were because one gave him gonorrhea. Like I said, he viewed them as traitors, as evil for giving him gonorrhea. He was very angry at that. Um, so he also would dump some of the bodies where he and his ex-wife were having sex out in public, like we were talking about. Um, so he he did have, connections. There were connections between the places that he was dumping and the women that he was abusing and killing. Um, when asked in an interview if he lacked anything that most people had, he coolly answered, caring. He just didn't care. He didn't care about these women. He didn't care about people. Um, and it would be very, I would think, very jarring to be staring him in the face and ask him, is there anything that you find that other people have that you don't? And him to look right back at you and say, I just don't care. I just don't care about these people. I don't care about these women. um I I can't imagine what that would feel like. I think that would feel nerve wracking, I think would be the best word that I would go for with it. Um, he had little to no empathy for others, no sense of what he was doing, how it affected other people, how other people felt about it. Um, he just didn't have any of that, no compassion for them. Um, it makes him a prime example of a psychopath and a malignant narcissist. According to Peter Roy Byrne, uh, they are so preoccupied, they are impervious to consider other individuals except as a tool to meet their own needs. Um, the reason he chose the women that he did may have been because of his previous relationships, which I would pretty much agree with that. Um, and the reason that he was able to do it, to kill for no reason, was simply because he just didn't care about them. He didn't care about their families. He didn't care about them. It just didn't matter to him. They were just a way for him to get his fun, a way for him to squelch that urge that he had for them. Um, so So yeah, so that is basically his early life. That is his that is basically kind of what led up to everything. So we see that his relationship with women was not very good. It was not very happy. Um and and we see that that has been a regular storyline in his timeline, that women, in his view, were disloyal. They were traitors to him. That they were just tools, a means to an end. And and you see that with a lot of serial killers. You see that, you know, where they do view their victims as just objects. They don't view them as human beings. They don't care. They are they just don't have empathy. They don't have compassion for another human life. And that's to me a very sad way to live. But we do see it in many of these serial killers and how they work. Um, but yeah, I mean that's basically what I wanted to get into for this stream, for this part two of the Green River Killer. Um, it doesn't look like, you know, I have many people in here watching, so hopefully most of you are watching the video on demand. I'd like to know what you think of this. I am going to be putting the Gary Ridgway series on YouTube. And so if you are watching this on YouTube, thank you very much. I thank you for watching. And you know, let me know in the comments what you think of Gary Ridgway and his early life, and the connections that you see, or things that I might have missed about his early life, things that I might have missed about, you know, his adult life. I'm always interested to expand on it. And I do have a Discord. You can message me asking for the link, and I will definitely send it to you. Like I said, if you're watching this on Discord or on YouTube, and you know, I always love to discuss these. If you have a suggestion for a story, that is also something that you can do in the Discord. I do have a channel just for that, for suggesting a true crime series. And so next week will be part 3, and it probably will be most likely the last part of the series, unless it really goes long, because sometimes it does. But we will be talking about his actual crimes and his criminal history, what he did do, and how he got caught, and where he is today. So, so I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for being here, and I hope to see you again. Come check me out on Twitch. It's the same name as on YouTube and on Twitter and in Facebook, and so you can find me pretty much anywhere. But I will bid you adieu. I will bid you good night and have a great one. Stay safe out there. Bye.